Okay, I am super excited. We are back with Dr. Michael Gervais today on the podcast. Last episode, we finished up with a conversation around meditation, mindfulness, and awareness. Today, we're going to jump right back into that conversation and really focus on something he discussed in last episode, which was conversations with people of wisdom. We're going to discuss what it means for, these people to hold up a mirror and not just be advice givers. We're also going to unpack throughout the rest of the conversation how to be that type of mentor and coach to others, how to ask the right questions. And he's going to give us a training plan, not just for our athletes, but for ourselves so that we can develop the mental skills ourselves as leaders and help support our athletes in developing those mental skills as well. Welcome to the Coaching Culture Podcast. My name is JP Nerbun. I'm joined by Betsy, Butterick. Nate Sanderson sat this interview out. Our mission here is simple. We want to help coaches become better leaders and build better team cultures. If you're interested in learning more about our work as leadership coaches and facilitators, or if you want to explore our online courses and books, head over to tocculture.com and betsybutterick.com. There are resources there for everyone, depending on what you need. So check them out. While you're also at tocculture.com, don't forget to subscribe to our weekly newsletter. It comes with the notes of each episode of the podcast. And boy, well, there are a lot of notes on this conversation with Dr. Michael Gervais. It also includes our latest articles, which we send out every Thursday, and practical culture building tips. It includes links to the Culture Builders podcast, which if you enjoy the Coaching Culture podcast, you will enjoy the Culture Builders podcast. There's about 4 or 5 episodes a week, and they're about 3 minutes, 4 minutes long. And they're very, very practical tips and advice for leaders. Now let's jump right into the second part of our conversation with Dr. Michael Gervais. Coming back to those methods of training, some of these psychological skills was sitting with someone, a wise person, right? Someone with wisdom. And some people might hear that and go, ooh, yeah, I've got that. I've got the coach that's coached for 30 years, right? That's won a couple championships. But yet you mentioned something that I think is really, really important. You said someone that will hold up a mirror for you. You've had, a few mentors like that, in your life. Let's double click on that. What does that mean to hold up a mirror? When you think about someone that is wise, that we're seeking our counsel, we're having conversation with, what are those qualities and especially that one of holding up a mirror?
So wisdom is made up. The expression of wisdom can come in a lot of ways. And one of the ways that I think about wisdom is that they have access to universal truths. It's like something that every person on the planet would go, oh yeah, but they just have access to it because they've done so much deep work. And so, but it can come out in a lot of ways. And the ones that I like, it's this unique combination that imagine if you were sitting having a conversation with the king of the jungle, a lion, right? Heavy roar, big claws, big teeth, huge physical presence. And at any given point in time, that lion might just smile and yawn and look at you and just kind of put their head on your lap and be cool. And there's that type of connected feeling. And then they're also unpredictably wild as well, these lions. And so that, claws and teeth could come out unpredictably. So it's that unique kind of razor's edge, like this person is incredibly dangerous because I'm giving so much to them. And at the same time, they're incredibly safe and loving. And that to me that relationship holds something very special for me. And what they do with the ones that I like to be around. And again, wisdom can come in a lot of ways, like silliness. There can be wisdom in silliness. There can be wisdom in a nonchalantness. Like you got to find your people. Okay. So when they hold up a mirror, that to me is a bit like the claws are coming out. Not that they're going to violently do something. That's not what I'm saying. Like this is all metaphorical, that they hold up a mirror so that I can really see myself. I can see the truth of what I'm saying, how I'm feeling, and how it fits into the idea and image of who I want to be. And they're not in it for themselves. They hold up a mirror to say, hey, I want to pause on something, or they just respond. But it's not because they need something for themselves. They're not in the relationship for themselves. They're in it for a different reason. Of course, we're all in it at some level for ourselves, but it's one of the great gifts that somebody can do, is hold up a mirror to you. And because we are busy making up stories so that we can feel okay. And when they hold up a mirror, it's not about being okay or not okay. It's about being honest. And the best of the best of the best have a uncommon commitment to get to the truth. And it's from that place that we can actually do something that will help us grow.
And in those wisdom conversations, and again, before this podcast earlier today, I was getting my 1.5-year-old up from a nap, and she's in her crib, and she said, "Mama, look, 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 look." And when I looked, she had a little stuffed lion, and she was holding it up, and she said, "Rawr." And it was a cute moment. But I also think about wisdom when you say it can take many forms. And JP mentioned, oh, I know this coach that's been coaching for 30 years, and these people that have done this deep personal work, and also recognizing that we get the wisdom of children in an unfiltered way. Maybe in part because the world has not yet told them how they should think or who they should be, or what questions are appropriate or inappropriate to ask. And so what comes up for me is, can you share a story of maybe someone who's very young that taught you something immensely valuable, or some wisdom that you've acquired, not from someone older and more experienced who's done the deep work, but maybe from someone perhaps younger or inexperienced that has that unfiltered lens to be able to see or speak the truth in a different way?
Two stories that come to mind. First is, it was my first world championship as a young sports psychologist 20 some years ago. And this young competitor, he was young. He was like 17, probably. He really needed a win. Family was broke. He was like right on the edge of like the whole thing collapsing. It was like scary financial times for them. They had sacrificed so much for this kid to be at the world championships. And I was there, and it was my first. And I was a mess. I'm supposed to be the one that is, grounded and and like supportive, and my hands are tucked under my armpits, and I've got that classic kind of, standoff position. But I was really like, I didn't realize it, but I was so nervous and so tense. And it's just adjacent. It was track and field. It was just adjacent. I wasn't on the field of play. And he looks over at me, and he comes over and he says, "Doc." I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Hey, either way, I'm buying you a hamburger after this." And he looked at me like, "Relax, relax." This is a broke kid on the field of play that saw his not wise sports psychologist, and he came over. So those moments, and there's so many others, but those moments are at this point, like, I'm 53, so the athletes that I work with are half my age. So they're all younger at this point, maybe not 17, but at that age, like, it felt so fresh. Just at the Olympic Games, I'll give you another story. Just at the Olympic Games, the team that I was supporting won silver, which means they lost gold. It's a very, very tricky moment for sure, is that you earned your way to a gold medal match, and then you come up short. So you've won silver, but lost gold. It's so emotionally complicated. And the silver's like, it gets right down to almost like a petulant 6-year-old, like, "Get that out of here. I don't want that." But you're the second best in the world, right? It's it's complicated. Okay. And these two athletes are so gracious, and they are the epitome of what you would want a true champion to embody. And they had just come off the podium. They're in their podium gear, and they're in like the tunnel going back to get changed. And I grabbed one of them, and I'll keep the names out of it. And I grabbed one of them, and I said, "How are you?" Which is not a question I ask on game day. It's almost immaterial in some respect. I can make a case for just about any question, but so I said, "How are you?" And it was like a shoulder, eye contact to eye contact. And she said, "Not good." And I said, okay. I said, look, we will process all of this. I want you to feel all of your emotions, like clear the tube, let it go. This is a learning experience for everybody here. You're not alone. And she just said that. And so she was getting ready to collapse. And then she gave me a hug. And then this is the point of the story is she just said, there's two things. What was the first thing she said? She said, thank you. And there was a pause. And then the second thing she said was, you were great, Mike. And it was such a tone of gratitude and appreciation for the 4 years. In our case, it was 2 years of work, the 2 years of work that led to this moment. And for a person to say to another person, like, thank you, and you were really great in this whole thing, in that moment is, it's one of those things that I'll forever like feel the tonality of that. And I don't know how to put all the words to it. Man, I'll tell you what, people that know how to be vulnerable and to take risks, to let it rip, to really go for it, the ones in the amphitheater, those are the ones we should learn from. Not whether they won gold or not whether they podiumed, but how they fundamentally make commitments in their life to themselves and to their people to try to be their very best on a consistent basis and to stay tethered to their people even when there's big emotions. To stay connected to all of that is, I think that there's so much to learn from how they organize their life, not from what they're capable of doing physically, but how they do it emotionally and mentally.
Yeah, there's something you're touching on there around those big emotional moments. And I think that Hollywood and oftentimes what's portrayed on TV with some winning coaches, we think that it's a lot great coaching is a lot of intensity, a lot of emotion, just laying it all out there, passion, fire, and yelling at players, getting in their face to fire them up there. How is that perception or belief around high performance not serving coaches today?
That's a cool question. The way that I define high performance coaches, so think about amateur performance coaches and high performance coaches, just three bands, if to make it simple, is that amateur coaches, they talk a lot and they'll give you advice and they'll tell you things. And like, let's say we're trying to fish and they've been at the pond a little bit longer than you have, and they're going to tell you where the fish are, and they just might not be right. And then, like it's just kind of a longer, messier process when you're working with an amateur coach. It's noisy. High performance coaches, they still talk more. I'm sorry, performance coaches talk more than high performance coaches, in my experience. So performance coaches, when they speak, they're more accurate than not. They understand and value that the doer has good information, but their information is better, meaning that the coach's information is better than the athletes. High performance coaches, they ask more questions. They're playing a bit of a different game. And the art of asking questions is very sophisticated because you can ask the wrong question at the wrong time. And it puts somebody into it greases the grooves for them to feel something or overthink. And like, but the rich value that a high performance coach places on the insights and the understandings that the athlete has is it a fundamental commitment to have an unconditional positive regard for that person. And on the sidelines, you don't know. You can see things that they can't see. There's value in that, but they can see and feel things that you can't. And so eliciting that in the right way in the right time. And what that does is twofold. It gives you more information. And then if you can have the art of circling it right back to them, slight little contextual question and or statement, and you give it right back to them to unlock how they've solved something like this in previously. So instead of like, I hold the keys, I'm the coach, right? I hold the keys. Here you go. Why aren't you doing it? We've talked about this. Oh my God, there she goes again. Oh my God, there he goes again. Like, okay, so it's something very different, which is deep observation, gathering information from the person, and then figuring out how to unlock how they've solved something close to this in their past. They hold the answers. They hold the unlock. And it's that art of high performance coaching that really moves into that mastery band that I alluded to earlier. And so that's another conversation. But high performance coaches ask more questions than they speak.
And JP knows how nerdy I can get about questions. And yes, like so much of what you're saying is exactly, I think the key, not only to mastery or to high performance, but also just to a richer quality of life and human understanding and conversation and connection. There's an Irish poet, Patrick O'Tuma, and he was in an interview once talking about how there's he read it in the book of Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. And there's a concept called MU, M-U, and it simply means unask the question. There's a better question to be asked. The question itself is limiting in some way. And with that and what you just said, my curious question is, what's one of the more impactful questions that you've ever been asked by anyone?
Boy, it feels like without context, I don't know how to answer it. I'll give you the theoretical one is that it was right for the moment. And so it's not like they tick down the 14 questions that are great questions and they pick number 7. It was like sometimes the greatest questions are they're just a look back. And so it's nonverbal. And it's like this deep, rich understanding of who the person is and the space required to go in. And so that's what a question is meant to do, elicit a new thought or a thought or an idea to unlock something that is already inside a person. To explore and unlock is really what questions are meant to do. And sometimes when they're nonverbal, they're just so rad because there's so much shorthand between the two people. So one of my favorite questions, though, as we're talking through this, is like when I ask somebody new that I'm new in a relationship with, and I'll say like, what is important for me? I'm in my head right now. What is important for you to share for me to understand who you are? And I just love that because I get to watch where did they go? Like there's so much room in that. But that's a very different framing for somebody. I was in the championship football, a playoff game, and one of our 5 stars comes flying off the field. And he says to me, and it looked like he was going to tackle me, like you could feel like I didn't know what was happening. And I'm on the sidelines. He's in his 6'4", shoulder pad, big helmet, come flying off the field, and he comes right up to me, right in my face, and he says, "Hey, I need you." And so I was like, "All right." And so we go over to the bench where it was a little bit more quiet, and he goes, "Give me a thought. I need a thought." I go, "What?" He says, "Give me a thought. I need thinking right now. I don't know how to think." And so the question I posed back to him, what answer would you give an athlete in a playoff game at that moment? He was completely upside down. And so I asked him back, I said, "What's your favorite song?" He goes, "What?" And I said, "What's your favorite color?" He goes, "Huh?" And I said, "What is your favorite color?" And he goes, "Blue." And I said, "Well, how tall is blue?" And he goes, "Get the fuck out of here." And he laughed. And he's laughing at that moment because it was all nonsense. I was not entertaining this thing. And he looked at me, he laughed, it changed his state. And he goes, "Oh, okay, doc, I see you." And he's laughing because he knows that like, I can't give him a thought. He wanted it. And so those questions are designed to short circuit an anxiety loop. Because how tall is blue? I mean, nobody can really answer that question. And so it's ridiculous enough to pull somebody out of a ridiculous cycle. And so sometimes it's, how tall is blue might be a great question. Now, hold on. What is the one that has been asked of me? I'm channeling my wife, who knows me better than anyone. Like when she says to me, "Is that it? Like, is that the truth? Like, is that really like how this is?" And it's like that idea of when we've been married 28 years, going on like 32 years dating. So there's nobody on the planet that knows me better than her. And when we're having a conversation or an argument or something, and there's some tension, and she's like, that, like, it's almost like that's not enough. Like that's not deep enough. That's not like, and just that type of like, there's way more. And I'm not really interested until we're getting down into the good stuff. That type of forcing function is so loving. So
I've got two questions here in the remaining time that we have with you, and one of them's a bit theoretical, the other one's a bit practical. The theoretical question, you've mentioned a bit of the spiritual side of things today. That word spiritual is coming up, and I'm curious from your perspective, and is what is the connection between the spiritual and the psychological?
Yeah, that's a really deep, rich question. And I think that the spiritual, both are invisible, and both have like an artifact, a leave behind. So from the psychological leave behind, we see behavior. From the spiritual piece, it's very hard to identify what the artifact is, but it's that animation of behavior. It's that very special way that a person is expressing themselves. And for me, the connection for the two are purely philosophical. How are you making sense of yourself, the world around you, and what happens after you physically die, and how did you get here? These are the hard, they're the hard problems of humanity. How did you get here? How do you make sense of yourself while you're here and the world around you, and what happens after you physically die? And all 11 world religions have a different, unique way of trying to help you understand it. But spirit is the animation. It's that aliveness that happens when you feel completely in harmony, complete and in harmony with the unfolding present moment. And that, to me, is what spirituality be. It's that quote oneness with. And so psychology is really designed to help you understand how you fit in the world, and the skills so that you can be yourself more often, so that you can be more connected to the unfolding moment. And for me, the whole unlock for spirituality is the present moment. It's where all of the information really takes place. And it is where you are in communion with God, whatever word you'll use for God, with spirit, with nature, with whatever. It happens in the present moment. So the whole kind of the depth of my work, if you will, is definitely not helping people perform better. It's to help them live a great life. And part of living a great life is to be aligned and in harmony with what is. And that's, I think, what all 11 world religions are pointing to. It's not so much about what happens next life. It's about heaven on earth, and that idea of being completely in harmony with what is. And that is hard to do, especially with the most complex ecosystems on the planet are other people, and yourself included, myself included. It's so complex in here. And so I just can't imagine passing the test without doing some good studying. And there's a lot of rich information that is already dormant within most people. So that's the connection between the two.
Yeah. I love that. I appreciate that. That was a big, deep one. I know I threw at you. This is maybe a little bit easier for you. You talked a little bit about the high performers and leaders, that we should be more concerned with how they order their life. When I was growing up, and I was a big basketball guy, I wanted to play college, I wanted to play in the NBA. My parents used to drive me from South Carolina up to Maryland to go to the Morgan Wooten basketball camp. He was one of the greatest, high school basketball coaches of all time. And I would go there, and every year Morgan would talk around, what it would take to be a high performer, to be great. And then he'd always give you a workout, right? A little, front and back workout that was for every athlete to go home and do and work on these, to build these skills to become this great athlete. And I guess my question for you is, most of our coaches, almost all of our coaches here, aren't going to have access to Dr. Michael Gervais to work with them. But could you give them a training plan, a workout here? What should be on that workout plan for them to build the psychological skills to be a high performing leader?
All right. Cool question. Two parts. One is, just like you guys, I've spent the last 8 years interviewing world's best on their psychology. And all of that is found on, the Finding Mastery podcast. There are scores and scores and gems of insights from world's best, whether that's Michael Phelps' coach, or it is one of the greatest performers on the planet, from surfing to entrepreneurship to, if we'll stay with basketball, DeMar DeRozan and Kevin Love and. Okay. So one is that there's a lot of rich information that's just sitting there. Many coaches and professors and high performance directors in professional organizations cobble together 6, 4, 12 of their favorite podcasts. And they do some of the early work is they'll say, all right, team, let me not use your analogy for a minute. They'll say, okay, team, this is the podcast for the week that we're going to work on. And I want you to fast forward to minute 12, or I want you to get to this, or I want you to listen to the whole thing, and then we're going to talk about it. Or I want you to answer these 3 questions across this podcast. What is this? What is that? And then we'll have a conversation afterwards. So there's something there that is unformed right now from my team and company, but is just like raw clay that is amazing. If it was for coaches and the camp setting that you're just talking about, is that I would make sure that the coach understands is understanding where psychology or mental skills sits in the development of a high performer. There's only 3 things we can train. You can train your craft, technical skills. You can train your body. That's why we have strength coaches for the most part. And you can train your mind. Those are the 3. Those are the 3. And so I think it's really important that each of us know our lane and we know how to work well with the other 2. And so if you are great as a technical coach, you could give a mindset skill that somebody could train, and you can point to a book, a podcast series, or whatever. And one of the skills that are so fundamental and easy that you could incorporate in your training is like, all right, before we get started, before we leave or before we get started, we're going to do some breathing training. Super simple. Before we leave, or before we get started, before we leave, we're going to be very clear about the statements that you make to yourself to back yourself. Like, what does it sound like when you are coaching yourself in the highest way? Like, hey kids, let's make this really positive in a way that like you are your greatest coach. It's not like what's wrong with you after you miss, 2 in a row. How do you want to coach yourself? I don't know, the practice of writing down 3 controllable goals, 100% under your control prior to practice. That's a really great practice that it's really not that sophisticated. But when technical coaches can fold in a couple basic mental skills during practice, I think it's a really cool thing to do. And they're not doing psychotherapy. They're not doing like deep psychological work. They're not doing complicated mental skills training. And coach, if you are meditating, take some time to meditate with your athletes. Like take 6 minutes at the end of it. Mental imagery, meditation, breath work, journaling for a few minutes. All that stuff is really cool as a beginning foundational set of practices.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I think your question still apply, or your answer still applies. My question was actually more so, what would the training plan for the coaches be? And I think you gave one that,
got it.
And I'm sure those things still apply. Right? I mean, everything you said was like, well, the coach should be journaling or meditating and sharing that with the athletes. But I don't know if you would add anything for coaches and what their training plan should be.
I would actually redo the whole thing and say the same thing again, which is like, coach, like read some books, like do the 3 practices of awareness yourself, and it will unfold like where there's heat, where you want to do more, and bring a set of best practices to the training environment. Long gone are the days where, when it comes to psychology or sports psych, where coaches will be able to say, I think you should go talk to the sports psychologist. Those days are gone. Yes, sports psychologists, you should have a sports psych in the building, 100%, because they spent 25 years, 20 years, 12 years, if they're brand new, studying the mind. Yes, you should have one of them. If you think the mind is important, you should have one, in the building, not on Rolodex, not on the fast dial, like in the building. The second is like the basic mental skills are so simple. So fold them into the rhythm of business, the rhythm of training. That's what the next expression of basic mental skills are going to take place on the platform, in the lifting room, and on the field of play, prior to whatever and in between. So that's where we're going as a discipline, with good deep work, at the right time.
This was great. Thank you so much for coming to the podcast and sharing so much wisdom and very practical advice and answering some fun questions as well.
You guys are great. Thank you, Betsy. Thank you, JP.
Yeah.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
We just had a wisdom conversation, and I'm pretty sure we're all going to reflect on how tall blue is during our next meditative session. So thank you for your time.
Let me know if you find the answer. That's a good one.
Okay, that's it for our conversation today with Dr. Michael Gervais. Incredible amount of takeaways. I won't spend all this time recapping, but I think it's really important to highlight a few things. One of those is that question: what is important for you to share so that I can understand who you are? Absolutely love that question. But was even more powerful was that story he told. And that's really encourages us to be focused less on using these pre-planned questions, but to be open to what might be even a better question in the moment, like how tall is blue, right? The great questions are about what's needed for that person and in that moment. The training plan for coaches, I love how he started this question, encouraging and talking about how high performers, they listen to podcasts, they read books, they read articles, and then they have conversations about them with their team. We can do this with our athletes. We can do this with our fellow coaches and leaders. It's a powerful, powerful way to learn. The Finding Mastery podcast, I think it's one of the best podcasts out there for athletes. It's really, really rich. And there's just so many different themes. You could scroll down through there and find some stuff that would be relevant to maybe some challenges that your athletes face. So be sure to check it out. And as I mentioned last time, don't just be working on your craft. Your craft as a coach is how you teach a jump shot, a baseball swing, or it's the latest defense, or how you plan your practice. For a salesperson, it's how you make the sales, those types of things. That's your craft. But Gervais talks about the other two pieces: train your body, train your mind. And that requires, when it comes to training our mind, self-talk, intentional self-talk training, breath training, writing down your controllables every day. I mean, this is the power of meditation, journaling, and finding mentors and coaches. So for your sake and for the sake of your team, don't delay. Start training yourself as a leader this season. If we can be any help on that journey, please reach out to myself or Betsy about our executive leadership coaching. You can learn more about that at tocculture.com or betsybutterick.com. Our passion is coaching coaches. Thanks for listening in to the Coaching Culture podcast. As our friend, Dr. Michael Gervais, recommended, please share these episodes with your athletes, your friends in coaching, and other leaders. Use them as conversation starters. While you are sharing, if you don't mind leaving us a review wherever you listen to podcasts, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss another episode.